Okay, we'll call this work session to order. Yeah, on this agenda is open for discussion. We begin with the roll call. District 1. Supervisor Crosby is absent. District 2. Supervisor English is present. District 3.
Supervisor Judd is here.
Thank you. Members of the public may also attend this meeting by Microsoft Teams computer or mobile app or by phone by calling 602-609-7513 or 888-680-6714, conference ID 861-332-383#. If you have trouble accessing the meeting remotely, call 520-432-9200 for direction. Work sessions are a time for county staff to inform and discuss agenda items with the Board of Supervisors, and public comments will not be taken. Introductions are always as you begin to speak, so that for the record we'll know who is making comments. Having said that, I'm going to turn it over to our Risk Management Director, Julie Morales.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Supervisor Judd, I appreciate your time today. So what we've brought forward today is some information regarding county vehicle and equipment damage. We plan to bring you quarterly updates on these throughout the year, but this first update is a calendar year synopsis of all of 2022. So just kind of keep that in mind with regard to that. Marty is here as the Public Works Director overseeing fleet, so it's his data and his repair, but I wanted to provide all the information for you to consider today. Before we get started, the data is roughly divided into what we consider non-glass incidents, which would typically be body damage, operational engine type damage, and then glass only damage. So those will be the terms I'm using to describe this. So I just wanted to be clear. We'll provide information about incidents in each of those categories and then the associated cost in each of those categories. I do want to preface that by saying that the data and the information that we have here today, the fiscal impact, the money, does only include repair, whether that occurs at the fleet shop, at a third-party shop, and associated charges such as tow fees and certain things like that. So there's kind of a larger conversation about other things that are associated with it, but that's what this conversation and this data is limited to today. So started here. So the first chart that you have is non-glass incidents by department. So this is the quantity of non-glass vehicle incidents, damages that occurred through the calendar year 2020. So we have it broken down by department here. As you can see, the Sheriff's Office has 61 incidents, which is equivalent to approximately 47% of the total quantity of damages. Public Works Department has 42, or the equivalent, about 33%. And then the smaller number, the court system has 6 incidents. And then we have, again, smaller amounts. Development Services has 1 incident. Engineering and Natural Resources has 9. Facilities has 4. Health Department has 3. IT has 1. And Legal Defender has 1. So again, this is just quantity of these incidents, non-glass incidents throughout the calendar year. Do you have any questions before I move forward?
It kind of maps to the number of miles that are driven by those departments.
And the size of the department, yeah. So the costs associated with those non-glass incidents in calendar year 2020 are represented in the next slide. So as you mentioned, the largest two, obviously. In this situation, Public Works has the largest amount with 42,856. Sheriff's Office is closely behind with a 38,190. And then the smaller amounts are obviously the lesser quantities of incidents. So the court system, about 6,262. These are rounded amounts as well. And one of the other things to consider as we're looking at this is that some of these incidents would have occurred at the latter part of the calendar year, October, November, December timeframe. So this is representative of costs that were incurred up through December 30th of 2022. It's possible these will adjust upward as those repairs continue to get done. They're not necessarily done instantaneously or very shortly after the incident, and some of them are done in phases. So those costs can kind of trickle out. So just consider that when we're going through the data. So the next grouping there is engineering. Theirs was about $1,582 in damages. Facilities, $1,082, and then the health department, $1,776. Any questions about this?
It doesn't sound like much.
Marty and I had an interesting conversation about that earlier today too.
Yeah.
So
Some of this is covered by insurance, so some of it, you've had insurance claims against us to minimize these costs, correct?
correct. The reason I mentioned that this is repair cost only is there's lots of other moving pieces around it, or can be. We may subrogate damages for incidents that we're not at fault for, that a third party would have caused in relation to these county vehicle damages. We may also have a claim placed against us by a third party related to these incidents where we have a separate claim for damages that we have to address. There are potential workers' comp costs that occur with these incidents if there is employee injury or injury to a third party. So there's lots of other costs, but yes, we also run some of these costs through the Arizona County's insurance pool. We pay a deductible and get reimbursed by them. So those costs are not represented in this presentation, but they are considerations with regard to the whole cost, the entire
The
cost.
reason I asked that question, not much here, because I know someone from the sheriff's department, I think it was Mr. Watkins, let's say, or title, Mr. Watkins, I don't know what his title is, said something to me not that many days ago about, we've already lost two vehicles to accidents, and I'm going, well, that doesn't show on here, because one of their vehicles couldn't be covered by $42,000.
Yeah, they lost 5 vehicles in the past year. And
Well, just recently said they lost 2, so I'm going, what value is this?
This is in-house repairs mainly, and
Correct.
anything added on to that. So these are in-house costs here.
So if we have a vehicle which damage exceeds the actual cash value, there's a complex analysis that you go through for the value of the car, the condition of the car, the deterioration, and so there's an analysis that you go through. If that exceeds the deductible, then as long as we can replace the vehicle, which is a challenge that Marty has had over the last year, actually replacing those vehicles, we will usually run that through ASIP. We pay the $2,500 deductible, and then they will reimburse us that actual cash value for the vehicle. Then that money would be distributed back into the fleet vehicle replacement fund.
Sounds like a shell game.
Well, this information with the ASIP information gives you the whole picture. So this is the information that we haven't provided this before. So I was thinking, if we
We'll
provide this,
start with this
we'll start
data.
with this, and then we'll add ASIP in there, and then the board can see the whole picture.
We used to get a picture, it wasn't every month, I don't know if it was twice a year, but the board, a group, I'll call them a committee, would meet every time there was an accident. And so we were kept up to date thinking of which departments were running in and backing up too much, and you see what I'm saying is, and that was disbanded.
I haven't ever seen it.
For Accident Risk Review Board was the most
I
recent.
didn't see it on the board.
Incident Risk
When I
Review Board
came
was
in.
the most recent iteration, right? Yeah.
2018. They kind of faded away.
So what,
So we haven't heard anything about accidents since then. I guess
right,
what
which
I'm
is
saying.
why we're here. So our hope is to provide this on a quarterly basis going forward in this format or whatever format the board decides is valuable for them.
And at least in this format, this is the general overview. And if you have questions about specific instances now that might be involved in current litigation, then we might have to go in an executive session. But at least at this point in time, it's just, this is a big picture overview of what has happened.
Well, I guess I want to play Debbie Downer. When I look at this, it doesn't tell the true story, and so why bother putting it out?
Because it was never received by the board.
But it doesn't tell me anything.
I think
I'm not looking at
I
it.
think the front page shows the number of incidents, very front pie chart.
And the amount of in-house costs that we're expecting.
So CCSO had 61 incidents, Public Works had 42 during this time period.
But that doesn't count the ones that were totaled. That
No,
doesn't
it
count. You
does.
see what I'm saying?
It does count those. It's
So-
any incident.
So this,
Per incident.
yeah, so that
Everyone.
incident, that one incident that's counted, those 5 incidents where the sheriff's office, for example, totaled 5 vehicles, and I don't know if, I'll just trust you that that's accurate for this year, because I don't know off the top of my head, I've got that list back at the office. Those 5 are included here,
Mhm.
but I understand what you're saying. The cost, the numbers that we're looking at, the fiscal impact is not a clear representation of those credits and debits related to the whole picture. And that there are a lot of moving parts to that. So I agree with you. This is one aspect of that. And as part of this work session, the hope is that you get this data, you look at it, and then you're able to tell us what more you want to see.
So we're looking for input from the board because, like I said, this is something we haven't
Well,
done
not,
before.
anything that you prepare for us becomes a public document. And so what I'm saying to you is, John Q. Public looks at this and he doesn't get the explanation that goes along with it, and he's going, that's not too bad, $42,000. Sheriff's Department's doing really good. That's what it says here. But they're not.
I understand.
So what I'm saying is I don't think it reflects. Did it mean anything to you, Peggy?
Well, like I said, I could explain away. I can't say the sheriff's any more disastrous than anyone else. They just have more cars on the road and more people on the road all the time. So yeah, I don't know. It's interesting, but I can't think of what would be better except for maybe the actual costs. But you explained it very well, how you subrogate. Sometimes you have to pay extra money. Sometimes you get money back. The insurance covers part of it, and I don't know how this would be valuable in another format. I don't remember I remember having the executive session where they said, this is all the costs that we've encountered. And maybe that was that insurance
So-
review.
So maybe instead of costs, maybe you're more inquiring about the incident. You want more information about the incident that's involved in these numbers?
Well, the next chart kind of shows what they were doing when
Yeah, that is,
the
that,
percentage.
and I can, if you're comfortable, I can move forward and we can circle back around to what else you might want after I
Okay.
finish the presentation. Are you
And
comfortable
I'll
with
think
that?
about what else I might want, because I wasn't even thinking that way. I was just listening.
Would you like me to continue, Madam Chair?
Shirley, go ahead.
Okay, so I think I covered most of the points related to this and then some, So the next slide, this section attempts to categorize in groups the type of incident, how the incident occurred. The thought process here is if you know what happens or how the incident occurs, there's mitigation strategies we can put in place to try to reduce the quantity of incidents that occur, and theoretically the cost would be reduced if we did that as well. I do want to mention that this is a loose interpretation of what happens. The report comes in from the department and fleet staff tries to do the best that they can to categorize those into these groups. Incidents can be categorized into more than one group, so just kind of keep that in mind when you look at the totals. It's not going to, these totals aren't going to match the totals in the first slide exactly because, again, you can be in more than one group. So with regard to this, the categories that we're using right now is if someone is engaged in an incident that could be described as a U-turn, where you back and hit an object, that is the blue category there. There's 30 incidents there. If you hit an object, and a county employee were to hit an object in a county vehicle or piece of equipment, that in that situation they are not backing or U-turning because that fits in the first category. That's the orange group there. That's 46 incidents. Loading and unloading, there are certain departments that have a lot more situations in which they load and unload, and so that's kind of a department-specific group. That's 3. Incidents that are found during inspection, whether that's an inspection at the department level with a daily walk around or something that is found at fleet. When fleet staff does, when a vehicle or a piece of equipment is brought into the shop, that falls in that category. And then the other unknown category, which sounds a little strange, but this is things like another third party would hit our car. Or we've had situations where the ground has given away, caved away, and the vehicle sustained some damage. This could be hail damage or wind damage when a gust of wind catches a door and bends it. So there's kind of a variety of categories that this other category includes. Was there any questions about that before I move forward to the glass only data?
If you say one of the reasons that they identified it so that training can be done in those areas? Have you done any?
That would be a reason.
Yes, ma'am. We constantly do this. Just to explain some of our strategies that we use. Every Monday morning we have across the board at all of our sites, we have a safety training meeting, and we'll bring these incidents up.
Right.
We have an operations supervisor meeting. We bring each one of the incidents up that they've had and talk about the outcome of it, whether it was at fault or not at fault, what we could have done better and whatnot. We also, just to take a step beyond, we do stretch and flex every morning just to get these guys limbered up so they're not out there injuring themselves when they go out on the road. So we're taking a lot of steps to move forward. Every day we're doing stretch and flex and reviewing the previous days, previous week's accidents or incidents. So we're doing a lot of that.
Okay, but you're only one department.
Yes.
So, I mean, you're not doing all these U-turns and backing ups and hitting objects. But I think for me, that was the value of the committee looking at it and putting some kind of, okay, you need training in this, or, because they offered what you could have to get yourself slate clean, I guess, is that you need training. But it wasn't from Marty.
Right.
It was from the group that always looked at accidents. So yours may be really helpful as a reason your incidents aren't rising, but you're not the only one that's creating incidents. So what are we doing about the others?
Yeah. There's not much control I can have over the others.
I understand. Can risk management have any control over it?
So what we're trying to do is we're trying to be the most useful resource and liaison that we can for these departments. We have stronger relationships with some departments. Some departments will come to us more freely and ask for help, or we can try to partner with them to provide training. We have recently, in the past several years, inserted ourselves a little more frequently in the process where we start to see trends. We'll call the leadership at a department and talk through it with them and try to facilitate action that way. So those are some of the current strategies that we're using. And I think long term we'll see if that's effective or if we need to be more active or if we need to do something differently.
And we're always looking as well to improve. We have the safety incentive program for both the highway division, solid waste division, which has helped. It allows an employee to get themselves above market. If they're paid right at market or a little bit below, they can get above through safe actions. So that works pretty well. We're always looking for other things to do. It's scrambled, but I don't have any control over the other departments to implement any of these programs. So, yeah.
And we're talking about training so that people have less accidents, but we don't have a comparison for the year prior. So that might help too. That would be something I would be missing here.
We do have one of the issues that we have, and I have some data I can send to you that has some year over year, both incident quantity and cost. I'm not certain how, we just recently started partnering with fleet staff to consolidate this into one spreadsheet, and this is just in a spreadsheet, so we don't currently have a database to track these incidents, so it is manipulating spreadsheet data basically. So I will be glad to send this to you if that's appropriate in the context of the work session, but and it does have some of the historical, again, quantity of incidents and costs associated back starting in fiscal year ending 2019. So I can send that back. I don't have a lot of data prior to that though. which that may not be relevant to the conversation, but I can send that out for you to look at.
I think in any organization that has a piece of equipment, whether big or small, we have to think of safety and safety for our employees and training for management to watch employee doing safe or unsafe things, because it all boils down to the employees that we have. Of course, we want to pay them properly, but we want to put them in safe conditions. And that means having training available to them so that they can't come back to us and say, well, nobody ever told me that I couldn't climb that ladder anytime I wanted to. Or do you see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So I think that not just car accidents, but we need to always look at how we can. I see you're sending out these little tips every once in a while on the email.
Yeah.
I think it has a man's name on it.
Yeah. Our safety loss control analyst, David
Okay.
Conway, sends those out monthly.
Yeah.
We try to send them monthly.
And so whether people read them or not, there should be some kind of follow-up. And if you have any influence with department heads, I think that safety has to be something that we keep on the frontal lobe all the time. And I say that not because I've been trained that way, but I noticed that the Freeport, every time they have a meeting, the first thing they do is they talk about safety. And then they talk about, budgets and all those other kinds of things, but they got a safety minute, every time they get together. And so it brings their employees know that whether they're talking to us or the employees, first minute goes to safety. So it makes it something that they want you to be thinking about all the time. It may be something that they laugh about. You see what I'm saying is, or they make fun of the company for doing it, but it's on the front of their brain.
Kind of like our cybersecurity training.
Yeah.
We just have that. It pops up and we have to do it.
Yes.
So we have a lot of incidents of employees hurting themselves. I say a lot. When you look at the list that comes from the organization that tracks that for us, always it should be your job, risk management, and our job is to try and make those numbers come down, whatever way we can. I think.
Correct. Yeah, I agree with you. It is. Should I continue?
Sure.
Okay. Any questions about this chart with regard to kind of the types of incidents?
That's on non-glass. Yeah.
This is non-glass, correct. This is just, we don't really classify the non-glass. It's like, is it broken or is it not broken? So, sorry, I mean to be sarcastic. So moving on to the glass-only incidents. With regard to quantity, CCSO had 38 glass incidents. Public Works had 31. We had a kind of a grouping of 3 there that only had 1 each. Assessor's office. Sorry, those blues are a little nondescript. Looks like health and IT. And then the courts had 5, and we just kind of consolidate all the courts for this purpose together, all the judicial departments. Development Services had 3, Engineering and Natural Resources 2, and Facilities had 6. Again, that's quantity of non-glass incidents. Glass-only incidents. And then the cost for the glass-only incidents by department, again for the calendar year. So CCSO, they're in green, they had 12,847, Public Works 14,042, and then the smaller kind of spattering there. Courts had 812, 956 for development services, 400 for engineering, 2399 for facilities, 441 for health, and 278 for IT. These are fixed a little bit more frequently or quickly rather. We don't really have lagging costs for the glass damage. Those are repaired.
No insurance claims.
Nor insurance claims, right? Those are 100% on us. That's all that's below the deductible through ASIP. So none of that qualifies. All right, that's the only data that I had for you today. Final questions or requests?
I think it'll be interesting for you to explore and maybe talk over with the management and talk over with the department heads how we can
Or safety prevention.
keep this from.
Safety prevention.
Sorry, I did. Yes. Yes.
Quick safety precaution.
I want to prevent safety.
Glass normally is something you're totally not expecting. Something
Yeah,
you're thrown
so
up on the road
A
or.
few things that I didn't mention. Yeah, that's just usually it's either witnessed or discovered. That's how those come in. And a lot of times they are not something that you can predict, and they're typically not at fault, typically. This would include not just windshield breaks, but situations where someone breaks a window. You know, you guys have older piece of equipment, you kind of slam the door and the windows break in the equipment. And
Or they lose a grip on the handle of the door and blows and
shatters the glass.
shatters the glass.
This one is a little
At fault.
more difficult to build in prevention training opportunities to reduce these numbers. There are some situations that that are dealt with through either discipline or retraining, redirection, but most of these are not at fault.
Most of them aren't because they slammed the door.
Correct.
Understood.
Correct.
I mean, I've had 2 windshield replacements in my car in the last 3 years. And
Because they're just driving down the right.
no way you can
Yeah.
prevent it, when the rock if it hits. Yeah.
I think you probably have seen this too, but it is important. I know that with the previous fleet director, we saw an incremental jump, a significant jump in the cost, and we couldn't really figure out what was going on. And when we called him, he said, well, look, now there are temperature detectors in the glass. There are all sorts of technological advances. It's not just glass anymore. It's like a mini computer. And so we saw costs really jump
I
up
have to reset all the.
about 4 years ago, where it wasn't just $200 or $300 for a windshield. It really, increased in cost. I don't know if you're continuing to see that as an issue.
It's increasing. We really look at trying to reduce our risk as well, wherever we can. One of the reasons Henry talked a little bit about the remodel in the fleet shop. 95, is it 95 North that did? 65 North recommended all these upgrades into our fleet shop to manage and control and secure our inventory. So to do that, we had to move our inventory placement around. So to actually make that happen, we had to move our offices into the old parts room. So we're complying with the 65 North requirements, just so we can minimize our risk to theft and everything else. So, and the end result is we get a new office. The other thing we're doing out there is we're trying to really mow the right-of-ways a lot more than it's ever been done before. And get them fence line to fence line. So when you're driving down the road, and CCSOs driving down the road at 2 in the morning, they may be able to see a deer or a cow or something else on the road and maybe avoid that.
Right.
And I don't know if we can really look at the cause and effect, whether, this mowing caused us not to actually avoid an accident, but, that's one of the things, and that's one of the reasons I really wanted to push that additional mowing and get those roadsides cleaned up is safety.
I was immediately thinking of that the other night when I was traveling on the Double Adobe Road late at night. Not much moon. And I thought, how much better it is that it's all mowed. So even with my lights, I have the ability to see if animals, are up ahead in the right of way.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are sometimes that deer will come out and hit you in the rear, and you can't prevent that. But I'm gonna say most of them
The rear of your car.
are in front of you.
Yeah, I had a deer come out and hit me in the side of the vehicle.
I did too once years ago.
At my window.
We have
It
a
hit
lot of,
right on the back fender, and I'm going, stupid. You know?
But with our safety incentive program, it's also, we also have a discipline component to that, where you have an accident, you're judged at fault, you may lose your safety incentive, and that safety incentive may be, it depends on what type of work you do or what type of job classification. Some of these guys may lose $700 if they have an at-fault incident. But also, we'll do discipline on that. They violated the vehicle use policy, so they're going to get a letter of reprimand. They have another one within a 12-month period, they're going to get days off. They have another one, and it's going to be a larger suspension or termination just because they can't drive, very well or operate very well. And so some of these incidents that Julie has on here with the costs that are in-house, we're paying for those, not paying the employee their incentive. So some of them aren't real happy at times, but
I think consequences are important in getting people to do what they're supposed to do.
it works. But
Yeah.
like I was telling Julie before, one accident or one incident's too many. So
Right.
it's eliminate.
I don't know if you're asking me what else I need to know right now. I was trying to be honest with you and saying, I'm not sure what this tells me.
I understand. And I knew it would be limited in scope when we came, but there are so many other components of it that make it more complicated. There are some confidential components to that, some things that are in litigation associated with it. So I want to give you information that's useful.
Right.
So-
That's why I said I don't want something out there that's going to be misinterpreted.
Right.
Because just looking at this, there was no explanation from you.
Yeah, I think it's a lot though. See, it's about perspective. I think this is a lot of money and a lot of incidents, but I agree with your position. There may be other people that look at it that don't think it's a lot of incidents and a lot of cost. So I understand your point is well taken.
And like Peggy said, it's about the vehicle, number of vehicles and the
How
mileage.
much down the road? Yeah.
You look at the number of vehicles we have is about 450 and growing through these grant programs.
Well, you have 103 employees and the sheriff's office has 181 as of last week. So.
And we have a lot of vehicles and equipment out there. And so we're exposed,
Right.
every day we're exposed to
You
risks.
can't just look at that and say, public works, oh my gosh, all those accidents.
I do.
Oh, well, I know,
Yeah.
but it's relative to the number of miles and number of people on the
Yeah.
road.
And if you look at CCSO's miles, I mean, it's just massive, the amount of miles they drive. We have 1,400 miles of road, 700 miles basically of paved, 700 miles of gravel. CCSO drives enough miles on a daily basis to drive every road in the county twice. So just a massive amount. And so their numbers may look astronomical, but you'd have to look at past years, look at historical analysis of that.
But at least in this information, the courts are not the biggest. If the courts were the biggest
I don't see the
problem.
board on there at all.
I know, and
There's information for us to keep looking at.
I still have a chip in my windshield now that I have every 40 time. Since we have to pay, I might
Sharon wants to
leave it
board
there.
members.
As a compilation.
Right.
It's helpful to him. Maybe helpful to the other departments, but you see what I'm saying is?
Mhm.
And I think as a county, we're going to need to hone it some in order for it to be important to them.
Yeah, we have like a stupid incident of, the super dump trucks where they have the wheels, the little tiny wheels that drop down.
All right.
We had a guy that left those down on an empty truck and he turned a corner really sharply. And all those wheels came off the rims, popped all the wheels. And so, that's at fault. That's an incident, but it's not really hurting anyone
Yeah.
else. But it is damage to our equipment.
That would be on our other
So
category.
that guy's probably going to lose $700 or so and
And that was
fix it.
expensive.
going to get a letter of reprimand and get corrected on his actions. So
Well, like I say, we should always be thinking of it. So I'm glad that we're highlighting it enough that we're bringing attention to it. I just was referring to looking at it and going, man, I'm not sure what this tells.
And, I don't think a program like mine would work for the courts. It
No.
wouldn't work for adult probation or,
Right.
these other departments, but because I have so many vehicles and equipment that these guys are out there moving and they're in them all day, they're at
Right.
extreme risk, a lot of money at stake. We have to do something like this
Exactly.
within my group.
But we shouldn't make it look like in any report that we put out there that you're a culprit. Do you see what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
And instead, if you didn't do what you did, don't tell me what your numbers would be like.
Yeah.
And that's hard to tell the public. Yeah, but you should have seen what it was like before,
Yeah, one of the biggest things was our death that we had with that equipment. Yeah, it's terrible. So we have to take it seriously.
Well, that brought it home to your guys too, so
Really
they understand that now.
Yeah.
That there was a reason for you not to crawl into the dump belly by yourself.
And I make all of them wear hard hats. And they complain about it, that the sky's not falling, that kind of thing. But I tell them every time you put on a hard hat, just remember you have a very, very dangerous job and you need to be careful. So every time you put it on, just have that reminder. And that's what we go with.
So thank you for preaching safety. We need that.
Safety.
Not safety prevention.
I'm surprised I'm just so talk this time of day. If there's nothing further that you need to ask about Peggy, then I'm going to close this work session. And thank you all.